Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Today, or this week I should say, Elon Musk wants to give Wikipedia $1 billion to change their name to Dickipedia for accuracy, of course. He's the best guy ever, the best, richest man in the world. We also have a really bad situation in the Middle East. Israel has officially entered Gaza. And in addition to that, we have more news about CBDCs, or how you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. Oh, and Americans are now going to need visas for Europe. Let's get started. The absolute worst thing that could have happened in the Middle East is an escalation of the situation already. The Israel army, the IDF, decided to actually continue with their ground, I don't know how you say it in English, ground assault, or the entrance into Gaza. This is a very bad situation because now, and remember, as I tried to mention last week, let's not pick sides, let's not point the finger and fight. At the end of the day, war is bad for everybody. I'm on the side of innocent people on both sides. But the problem now is that the Muslim world is kind of coming together to go ahead and go against Israel. And if you guys don't know the history about the Muslim world, there was always a kind of like a family spat, let's call it that, where you have two different types. And this is a very high-end, kind of very overview, not technical at all, right? So it's missing a lot of details. It's a lot more complicated than this, but this is just an overview so you can understand, and this is part of the reason why I do these videos. Essentially, there are two different types of Muslims. There's Shia and Sunni, and essentially they both don't like each other. And I'll give you an example: Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia obviously is allies with the US, Iran not so much. And during the previous Trump's administration, they were working on what's called the Abraham Accords, where they're working for peace, essentially, in the Middle East, and they were working on peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Now, that would have created a kind of counter-axis, let's say, to the situation with Iran. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, we're not going to get into that, because obviously I have my own conspiracy theories about that. But at the end of the day, war is not bueno. Remember that Russia made a military agreement with Iran as well, right? So now, instead of those talks between, for example, Israel and Saudi Arabia continuing, now Iran and Saudi Arabia, which have always been kind of fighting each other through proxies meaning they pay third parties to do their fighting for them, right? It's not a direct war. It's kind of like a third party war that they support. Now they're talking. And so now with the situation in Israel and Gaza intensifying, and Israel going into Gaza, the entire Muslim world is turning against Israel and combining together, essentially. And not even that, it's also getting out of hand when it comes to other countries as well, meaning that now it's basically going to be, we're literally sleepwalking into World War III. We have on one side Israel, United States, and Europe, and then we have on the other side Gaza, Palestine, Iran, Turkey, Russia, China. And this is not bueno. And if you guys don't know, there's a percentage here. I believe it was 70% of the people in the U.S. military are obese or overweight. I guarantee you, people in the Chinese military and the Russian military are not overweight and obese. And I think this is going to be a bit of a problem, because now there's very aggressive chatter, especially coming from Iran and Turkey, for example, against the U.S. if they allow this to continue to escalate. And this is this is not bueno at all, right? So that is a summary. Overall summary, again, is a lot missing, right? We're not going to pick sides. I'm on the side of innocent people everywhere. Unfortunately, war is bad for everybody. But thanks to that situation in the Middle East, the stocks in the United States and Canada went down, because obviously that fear of the Third World War coming about. And one of the things that I found very interesting this week is that before, when the interest rates were lower at 3%, I'm going to put some of the kind of highlights or interesting news on the top from now on, because I think it's super interesting to do that. The qualifying yearly income for our medium price home in 2020 was $49,000, let's say 50 grand even. Now it's more than $107,000 according to NAR. So because of the increase in the interest rates, you can see that it's much more difficult for people to buy a house. They essentially can't. Rents are going up. Now, the card delinquencies are going up, the highest on record as well. So you can see now that the consumer is starting to show a little bit of chinks in its armor. That's a big problem in the grand scheme of things due to the fact that almost 70% of the economy in the United States is consumer spending. So if everything is more expensive because the interest rates go up, people can't buy houses, they can't buy cars, they can't buy anything because everything essentially is bought on a loan and on credit cards in the United States, and that affects 70% of the economy. Elon Musk wants to give Wikipedia $1 billion if they change their name to Dickipedia. He says in the interest of accuracy. I thought that was hilarious. In Europe, American citizens aren't going to need a visa. That was a little bit of clickbait, so forgive me for that. But you are going to ask permission. You're going to need to ask permission to go to Europe now, starting in the spring of 2025. There aren't going to be stamps in your passport, and you're going to use facial recognition in addition to your fingerprint to be able to go ahead and do that. Overseas market news. The European markets are mostly lower. Obviously, the situation in the Middle East is affecting that. Latin American markets are mostly mixed. They did have the first round of the presidential elections in Argentina. Argentina being the richest country in the world in 1900, right? 1900, the year 1900. Now have been voting for the left and communists for 70 years, and socialism there has now created almost 50% poverty in the country. So now that the party that is in control won the majority or the biggest percentage of the first round of the vote, the stock market there went down by over 22%. And now they're going to have a second round with the two top guys, basically. Milei, which is the libertarian right wing, he won about 30%, and then the communists, which is the same thing that they've been voting for the last 70 years, won 33% of the vote. Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed. Egypt, which is the biggest winner there. And then Asia and the far, far east, mostly mixed markets, not anything over 1 or 2%. But we have the Kospi in South Korea going down over 3%, the biggest loser of that market. Bitcoin and crypto news. Speaking at the World Economic Forum, a former head of the IMF China division, IMF being the International Monetary Fund, kind of like the central bank of central banks, said that CBDCs, or government coin, will be programmable in a way that will enable governments to dictate how, when, where, and what, and by whom they can be spent, including the imposition of an expiry date. Get ready to live in a prison for the rest of your life. And soon I'm going to tell you here in a moment how one of the biggest meat processors in the world is investing in insect protein. So they're going to feed it excrements, poop from animals, so you can eat it and feed it to other animals. It's going to be awesome. The Binance, largest crypto exchange in the world, temporarily halted crypto withdrawals due to a quote-unquote technical issue. Just remember that this doesn't happen with, futures withdrawals or stock withdrawals, for example. And Bitcoin is far higher this week, over 15%. It got to 34,144, best weekly gain since June. And this is thanks to the situation in the Middle East and the uncertainty of what's going on in the economy, the global economy. Commodities, the calculation, if Biden administration continued with the policies of Trump of producing oil, we would now be producing 3 to 5 million barrels per day in addition to what we do now. That would be an additional $250 million a day. That would boost the U.S. economy, but instead of that going to the American citizens, it's going overseas to people like the dictatorship of Maduro in Venezuela. So let's just kind of make sure we understand this completely. We want to save the environment, so we're not going to produce oil in the United States. We're just going to pay somebody else to do it for us, which in turn isn't really helping the environment at all, which begs the question, why even do this? It's like they're engineering a collapse of the United States. It's like they want to impoverish us on purpose. See how it works? That's just a conspiracy. They would never do that on purpose. Oil went down by quite a bit. This was due to the fact that Israel delayed their invasion of Gaza, which means that there was a lot less uncertainty about the situation of oil. Remember that still the vast majority of oil comes from the Middle East. So if there's a flare up there, there could be a lot of things. There could be another oil embargo, for example, and that would send oil through the roof. So since there wasn't that much uncertainty since they delayed the invasion. Oil went down. US went down by almost 4% to 85.54, while Brent went down 1.85% to 90.48. Gold surged for $2,000 above 2K for the first time since May on Friday. It closed at $2,006.60. Silver went down by over 1% to 23.19. Get ready, because if this actually does, if this is the time in the Middle East where things really do get pop off, right? If they really get nasty, then gold and silver are going to go through the roof. Financial and banking news, interest rates of 8% for the most popular home loan in the United States. This is the highest in September of 2000. So we're talking almost 24 years. 7th straight week of increases, and mortgage applications are at a 28-year low. The apps now are dipping since the slowest weekly number since 1995. So that's 2005, 2015, 2025, 6, 7, 8. We're talking almost 34 years. Now, the housing market, construction and housing and everything is about, last time I looked it up about 6 months ago, it was about 17% of the economy. It might be a little bit smaller now because it's not moving as much anymore. And the consumer spending is about 70, close to 70%. So we have a situation where now the consumer, even though we're going to share some good numbers with you about the consumers in the United States, is continuing to slow down. The consumer spending is kind of it's kind of like a Trojan horse, because the numbers are showing good numbers, meaning that the numbers are showing that people are spending more money, right? Which is almost 70% of the economy. But what they don't tell you is prices are up 50%, 100%. So people are actually spending more money, but getting a lot less. Remember, should I tell the burger story? You guys have been following me for a while. Get tired of that. I hope they put the little cartoon of the burger story. But the guy on TikTok shared that the actual prices, the increase over the last year, have been 75%. So you literally, if you were spending, I don't know, $500 or $1,000 a month on food, imagine spending literally 3 times that, or double that, or even just, 10% more. And that's why the consumer spending numbers show well. But in the end of the day, people are actually spending less money because they're spending more money but getting less, if that makes sense, right? Financial and banking news continuing there. The Biden administration is now running the 3rd largest budget deficit in history. One of the things I find really ironic is the Zillennials. I think these are the guys after generation I think it's maybe Z. That's the same ones. But they helped get Biden into office, and now instead of having their loans canceled, they're going to get drafted into World War III. Maybe this is a lesson that you finally need to learn on. Actions have consequences. Political news. Chinese scientists have discovered 8 never-before-seen viruses on a tropical island, and now they're going to plan to experiment with them. Not that, there would be a worldwide pandemic for a virus that comes out of China. China. I love them. The representatives of the House finally voted for somebody, Mike Johnson, ending 22 days without a chamber leader. Climate radicals attacked the Louvre in Paris. They were throwing things at, I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's where the Mona Lisa is. There's a huge glass diamond, a glass triangle. And I wish some of these climate radicals, they've been telling us since I was little that, I'm older than you think, that the world is going to end in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. It looks like they just nonstop with this chaos, this warning. But you would think that instead of destroying other people's property and blocking interstates, that would actually do something to help the environment, like, I don't know, clean dirty rivers, plant trees, right? No. Let's attack personal property. That's how you save the environment. New York City is offering illegals plane tickets to anywhere in the Big Apple. So let me also get this straight. So the haven for illegal immigrants that were welcomed years ago, now they don't want them anymore. And now instead of having them stay in New York City, now that they have to bear the brunt of the cost of the situation with illegal immigrants, now they want to offer them plane tickets to go anywhere in the world except New York City. How quick politics change. Economic news, Biden inflation. The cost of Halloween candy is up 13% this year, which may be a little bit higher considering the numbers that I just mentioned to you a moment ago. A huge San Francisco apartment building reportedly lost 50% of its value as the commercial real estate market tanks. This is a much bigger problem than they're reporting because remember that banks have loaned all of these companies the money to build these buildings and have commercial real estate. And unlike residential real estate, you have to renew those loans every 5 to 7 years or so. So there's a situation now where all of these buildings that were financed at very, very low interest rates now have to be refinanced at almost double the monthly payment. So if a lot of these commercial real estate companies stop buying or stop paying these loans or don't refi, for example, then the banks could collapse. So keep in mind. I think what I'll look up this week or Google the amount of loans, what percentage of loans are commercial real estate. I would probably say, 20, 50%, something like that, maybe 30. It's not bueno. Car owners are falling back on their payments, the highest on records, the highest delinquency rate in almost 30 years. Remember that this is consumer spending. So if people stop spending money on their cars, again, that's bigger hits for the banks as well. According to the IMF, Germany's nominal GDP is going to surpass Japan's by this year. Japan has had basically a stagnant economy for the last 20 years due to the fact that the government has just printed money and invested that money buying its own stocks and properties and everything else. They are now going to become the fourth largest economy in the world, Japan, and then Germany is going to surpass them to become the third. Remember, Germany, I think the last time I looked it up, I believe has 80 million people in the country, whereas Japan has 150 million or 120 million. So it's a big difference in population. Those Germans always running things. U.S. Commerce Department is saying that the U.S. economy grew at its fastest pace in nearly 2 years in quarter three, which is 4.9%. The way that they calculate that, by the way, we have 4 3-month trimesters. So January, February, March would be one trimester. So there's 4 different periods of 3 months in a year. And what they do is they take the calculated amount that the economy grew by in those 3 months of the year, and then they calculate it for the year at what it would have grown by, meaning that for those 3 months, what the economy grew at, if they did that for a year, it would be 4.9%. Does that make sense? Because I know a lot of people get confused about those numbers. Reports that the U.S. the consumer spending increased more in September. It was up to 0.7% rather than 0.5% for the forecast. Remember what I told you, that people are spending more, but getting a lot less. And in corporate news, major meat producer Tyson, one of the largest meat producers in the world, is going to invest in insect proteins and lipids. Uses animal waste to feed flies, which will then be turned into food for pets, aquaculture, and living livestock industry. So they want you and I to eat bugs and walk to work because our cars pollute too much, but they can fly in a private jet to their fancy meetings in Switzerland. You see the hypocrisy, right? If we really were in a climate emergency, they wouldn't be flying a private jet. They would be flying commercial. That's what I'm saying. So I'll eat bugs when they stop flying private. How's that? Spotify went up over 10% after they reported an unexpected profit in quarter three, the first quarterly profit in over a year. They credit the cost-cutting measures in addition to the lower market spend and layoffs. I don't even buy Netflix or Spotify. I just think it's a waste of money. Microsoft posted almost a 13% year-over-year revenue growth amid its Azure cloud segment, which went up over 29%. Shares rose over 7% on the news. Amazon also had strong quarter three results. They had a 13% jump in revenue in addition to their profit tripled to nearly $10 billion in quarter three. All these companies are just minting money. And Ford has reached an agreement with the United Automakers Workers Union. I'm looking at the numbers here, 25% wage hike over the next 4.5-year contract. The total amount of the pay hike, including all the benefits and everything, is going to be 33%. And they're saying it's going to put the Detroit automakers at a disadvantage to companies like Toyota, other foreign automakers, and also Tesla because they don't have unions. So it's going to cost a lot more to make American cars, which means more and more people are going to buy foreign cars because they don't have the same problems with the labor. BP, British Petroleum, one of the largest oil companies in the world, is now going to announce a new deal that they're going to order $100 million worth of Tesla superchargers. This is going to add another revenue bump for Tesla. And Alphabet, which is the owner of Google, they dropped almost 10% after they had the worst weekly performance in 2020 since March 2020. They beat the top and bottom lines, but cloud business fell quite a bit of expectations, which is the reason why they fell. Technology, the US, I mentioned about the visas that aren't really visas to Europe. Sorry for the clickbait. The true cost of fueling an electric vehicle, including the excess charging costs and subsidies, is actually $17.33 a gallon. So $17.33 a gallon. So we're still very far away from getting parity when it comes to the EVs. Scientists unearthed something remarkable with Roman archaeological and construction sites. There was glass that they found that was shattered that actually changed its molecules over time. And now that they're recreating this in a lab, with our current technology, they're going to be able to apply this to things like stealth technologies, lasers, and communications devices. So the past, if you guys haven't seen the series on Netflix from Graham Hancock called Ancient Apocalypse, highly recommended. Very good. Investment news: California on Tuesday ordered GM Cruise's driverless cars banned from state roads and removed the permits, calling the vehicles a risk to the public after there was an accident, and they supposedly hid the video of people getting hurt in the video. So it looks like we're a little bit far away of automatic cars as well. In international events, Philippines called China an aggressor on Monday. If you guys don't know about the situation in the South China Sea, there's a situation where there's a certain limit of waters that are considered international waters and your own waters for a country. You know, it's something like 100 miles or 50 miles, something like that. So in the South China Sea, that whole area, right, it has a bunch of different countries in it, Vietnam and Philippines and others. Well, they're claiming, China, that it's part of their territory rather than it being legally of other parties. And so there's a situation where China is just kind of being a bully when it comes to international water, saying that it's theirs. And a lot of other people aren't liking it, like the Philippines. China, I love them. Interesting facts: Spanish police on Monday seized ancient gold artifacts valued at over $63 million that were robbed from a Ukraine museum. They're mostly jewelry, and it was captured just now, but it was smuggled out of Ukraine in 2016. So glad to see that stuff is back. I don't know why they didn't melt the they melt the silver and melt the gold and try to sell it like at a pawn shop in the US. And one of the things that I think we should, just to kind of reflect on what's going on in the world, you're not in a war in Ukraine. You're not in a war in Israel or Gaza. You are not starving for food or even have, water that isn't potable in Africa. So take a look in the mirror and reflect a little bit on your life, because most of us in the United States have it good, and most of you guys even in Europe or even Latin America have it really good. So stop complaining about the stupid things in life and enjoy it a little bit. 60% of Americans making less than $60K a year. Consider that $60K a year is top 0.01% in the world. 82% of Americans make less than $100K a year. So if you're making more than $100K a year, you're in the top 8% of the US, which means that you're in the top 0.01% of the world. And 92% of Americans make less than $150K. So if you make more than $150K and I hear you complaining, you're gonna get a knock on your door, because you're gonna get a slap in the face. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.